Welcome to What's on Tap, a show brought to you by Tappedin and created specifically for bar and restaurant professionals. Given the unprecedented situation we're facing from the coronavirus pandemic, Tappedin decided to do our part and create a show to provide information on resources and support available, create a platform to share ideas and perspectives, to retain the camaraderie during a time of separation, and to help raise funding for those in need. We're going to interview a series of people who can shine a light on all of these issues and more. And we might have a cocktail or two, because why not? We hope you find this show interesting and helpful. Cheers! Our first two episodes featured very successful restaurateurs, both having reached a level of financial stability and backing that isn't common in the restaurant industry. And in both episodes, one of the guests said something to the tune of, "We are the lucky ones. We have great lawyers, accountants, and financial support. We feel bad for the neighborhood bars and restaurants, the ones who were barely getting by before the pandemic hit." In an industry where 80% of restaurants fail within 5 years, there isn't a lot of extra money to hire high-powered attorneys and CPAs. Usually, they're just trying to cover last week's bills from this weekend's rush. And employees generally don't even have health care, so a $400 an hour lawyer isn't a realistic thought. So What's on Tap decided to dedicate a show to talk about legal issues facing both employees and owners in the current environment. We gathered two legal titans who focus specifically on the alcohol beverage industry and asked them the questions that we thought you would want to know. And we even got them to donate some consulting time to two lucky listeners. So stay tuned to find out how to win.
Thank you both for coming. We are recording now, so this is our third episode of What's on Tap. And we created this show really to help out bar and restaurant industry employees, workers, owners. And one thing that came up in our first two shows, both of whom are co-owners of restaurants, is that they were fortunate. They had great legal advice, they had great accountants, they could really weather the storm, they had deeper pockets. They were both concerned for the smaller independent owners and whatnot, and that's why I asked you gentlemen to come here and maybe shed some light on some of the legal issues that bar and restaurant people are facing, whether they're an employee or whether they're the owner. And so I really appreciate you guys for being here. And we said, well, if we're going to do it, we want to get some of the best of the best. You know, you guys aren't just the run-of-the-mill tax person that you go to or something like that. This is your area of expertise, and I feel that we've got two amazing lawyers here. So thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Gentlemen, will you both introduce yourselves, your practice, and a little bit of your history to kind of frame why you're the right people?
Jim Webster. I've kind of grown up in the industry, started practicing for a law firm when I was in law school that did all the work in the alcoholic beverage industry, and have just stayed in the industry, have focused on it, represent suppliers, represent importers, represent manufacturers, represent distributors, represent hotels, restaurants, grocery stores, mom and pops chains, the whole thing. Focused only on the industry and industry issues.
Hi, I'm Mark Wilcox. Like Jim, I started as a law clerk when I was still in law school, working for a firm that specialized in beverage alcohol industry. Stuck with it, always had some beverage alcohol industry work in my practices. As years went on, I became more and more specialized because certainly when I first started, there weren't as many attorneys who were doing it as there are now. I've also do a fair amount of commercial real estate work. I do work for all three tiers. I work for manufacturers of alcohol and distributors and retailers, all shapes and sizes.
And so you guys both came in about the same time, about 30 years of experience, both of you in this very industry.
Since 1982.
Met in law school.
We know each other.
It was at DePaul.
So you guys get your Chicago connections. I know Jim's got Wisconsin roots too, so we connect there. And when I say you guys are the best of the best too, you've got your LLM.
It's a master's of law, and it's in real estate. Do a fair amount of commercial real estate work, lots of it for people in the industry. So I work on leasing and loans. I've also spent a decent amount of time working for banks with commercial loans, commercial real estate loans, papering and negotiating from both sides, from the borrower side and from banks, both local banks and large international banks.
And that'll come in handy in our conversation today as well. And Jim, I also saw in your website that you were inducted into a Hall of Fame to some industry as well. So
The National Conference of State Liquor Administrators.
there we go. So you guys are the right two to be here with us today. So thank you very much. First, let me start with some facts. To help frame where we're at in the industry. We all know that the bar and restaurant industry has been one of the hardest hit out of any in this kind of coronavirus pandemic. There are 11 million restaurant employees in the U.S., and about 2/3 of them are out of work, according to the National Restaurant Association. It was predicted a few weeks ago that by the end of April, up to 14% of these businesses will have closed their doors permanently. And one of the interesting things that I noticed too is that there was a lot of money allocated for the airline industry, specifically earmarked for them, and they represent a fraction of the number of people that were negatively affected as the bar and restaurant industry.
Cruise ship industry, places like that.
And is that just bad lobbying on our industry, or what?
No, well, there's a lot more money and a fewer players when you get into the airplane industry and so forth, that they can work the halls of Congress pretty effectively. But I think the industry, through the National Restaurant Association, the Illinois Restaurant Association, the Wine and Spirits Association of America, DISCUS, which is the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, the Wine Institute, I think they've done a very good job in representing the industry. The thing with the industry, and I think where there's so many more small businesses, and you go back and look at the industry, even when Mark and I first started, and we worked for the same firm as law clerks, is you could always tell the next wave of immigrants seemed to land in this industry, and you could watch it coming all the way through. So it's an industry that people that are really self-motivated can get in, and they can be successful. So you've got all of these, the independents, the small guys, and you're just spread out a little bit further. So it's a little bit harder to get everybody together, and you've got many more issues because you've got many more people that you're trying to get on their feet or deal with. So I think that's probably the difference between us and the airline.
So we're stuck with the PPP and some of these other acts that were a little bit more generic to all small businesses. Do you feel that bars and restaurants were getting their fair share of those funds?
Well, if they're not, I think they will, just because of the sheer numbers that are employed in businesses in that industry. In the beginning, they were doing it very, very quickly. So I think as time passes, the restaurants and the bars and the food industries they'll be more represented.
And the banks, it looks like we're incentivized to process larger checks, because if they could only do so many loans per day, to concentrate on the big players or their best clients really made sense for them. Terrible for the smaller businesses, which is really kind of the opposite of what this impact was supposed to have.
Right.
I think you're actually right on that, Joe. When this whole COVID-19, when the pandemic started at the beginning, it looked like it could be 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks that we'd be under this. We're 7 weeks into it, and I think for a lot of business owners, especially in the industry, I think that as it started, there just didn't have the professionals behind them, I think. And you're right, the bigger banks were incentivized. The bigger banks jumped, I think, on the bigger players, as we saw with some of the news reporting with Shake Shack and Potbelly and some of the other ones that ended up getting a decent amount of money. It took a little bit to get into it, but I think as Mark said, and Mark's absolutely right, it hit so fast that if you didn't have that application for PPP in literally immediately, there wasn't anything left.
Right.
Now we're on our second tranche. I think there's $340 billion in this one, but I guess what we could tell them is the same thing you're probably telling them as well, is get your applications in, because that money is also going fast.
It's not gonna make it, just based on the numbers of the first round, and with 11% of businesses got their funding from that. So if you extrapolate that and saying, well, another 11%, because this round of funding was actually a little bit less, it's going to be a lot of bites at the apple before everyone actually gets it, and a lot of these small bar and restaurants just have no chance of making it that much longer.
That's right. But the fact is, it's like anything else. It's like the lottery. You can't win unless you play. Get your application in. I mean, get it in there, because there could be, and there probably will be, another tranche in this as well. Sure. So if you're all lined up and you got it in there, then you'll be first in line for that third one. But it's really what they need to do is look at this, assuming they want to stay in business. Sure. And at this point, they're not looking at this and saying, okay, I want to do something else now. But if you want to stay in business, is get in there. The government's there. There is help provided, but you got to get the application in.
So let's talk about the PPP then. There's been a lot of complaints from the industry in that it's not really created obviously for them, because it's saying, well, you got to hire back your employees, and we'll even waive the fees, waive the forgive the loan if you match your payroll. But that starts right away. So if you put your loan in right away, which is April 3rd, maybe you got the money mid-April, for 8 weeks you're bringing on your entire staff, even though your restaurant is at either completely closed or running at a fraction. So any advice that you could give these businesses that might have gotten their money, saying how do you maximize that to be able to get some loan forgiveness, but at the same time not just throwing it away on an employee who you might have brought back who was on unemployment, but then at the end of that 8 weeks you might not have enough business for them to put them back on unemployment?
It's a tough question on that. I mean, I guess I would say the first thing with it is that the PPP, it's a loan. And then, at the end of it, then you can apply and have it for forgiveness. And in order to get the forgiveness, you got to spend the money, at least 75% on employees, on salary, and then the rest of the money can be spent on utilities and mortgage interest, lease, things like that. So you've got to focus on that part of it. But I think, again, as you're getting your application, you got to get as much as your employees back as you can, or hire new employees. But you got to get back up to that number, because you're going to be held to a number when it comes down to the forgiveness. So you really got to get yourself there. And again, we're sitting now in Illinois that we're under this continued stay-in-place order, the SIP order, until May 30th. So we've got, another 4 weeks for it. So we've also got the month of June. So, hopefully as this thing moves down the track, and you're seeing some of the states that are opening up, Georgia opened up, Indiana's got a plan in place to open up, Florida opened up, Texas is opening up, is that we'll get some opening up when we get into the early part of June, and see if they can get themselves, the point is to get from point A now to point B. Get there, and let's see what things look like, and hopefully we can either be in a position that you can make it at that point, or maybe there'd be some more money that would be available to get you out a little bit further. But it's really, you gotta stay in, you gotta make the application, and you gotta stay in business.
And I've talked to several clients who can't hire much of their staff back, but they do focus on hiring back key employees and managers, so that as things start opening up, they're sort of under control, haven't found another job, haven't gone somewhere else, understand how they run their business. It's not ideal, but
to get forgiveness, they have to meet some minimum thresholds.
That's true.
They have to spend a lot of money.
Right.
And again, it's great to get people back, but if there's nothing for them to do, is it really helping that much?
Well, they try to find something. And some restaurants are exploring takeout when they haven't had takeout, alcohol delivery when they haven't had alcohol delivery. It might not be forgiven, but they're using the funds to try to keep the key employees sort of invested.
So what if you're an employee that doesn't want to come back? You're saying, I'd rather, A, I don't feel comfortable, safe, or B, like I'm actually making more money on an unemployment, and my boss is telling me, like, we're probably not going to be at full capacity at the end of the 8 weeks. I'm going to have to furlough you again. Who gets to make that decision to come back? So if the employer offers the job back, do they have to take it?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's really kind of the way it goes. I mean, what they should be doing is making the offer to bring the people back that they want to bring back. You've got the money there, but you've also got that business, so you got to be thinking long-term with the business as well. So the people that you want to bring back, put your offers out there, and as anything else with government, with banks, with the Small Business Association, records are really important. So they've got to have good records with this. So make an offer out there in writing, have them either accept it or have them deny it, have something in writing so that if they're not coming back, you've got the records to show now you've hired somebody else or you've gone someplace else with it.
And is it a head count or is it a total dollar spent on salary?
It's a head count. I mean, it comes into play in there's caps on salary.
Sure.
Because once you hit a 6-figure salary, then things really drop way off. But it really is a head count.
Because that's a concern too, is that the owners might just give themselves raises. Like, we'll spend all that money.
Or hire family members.
I think all we would say with that really would be is that because the way it's structured, you got to make application for forgiveness. Be careful. Really do it the right way. For owners, you can pay salary for owners. Part of this money, part of that 75% includes benefits, but it does not include benefits for owners.
Oh, good.
So,
I mean, not good, but
right.
It's good for the little guy.
That's exactly right. So they can spend money on the owners for their salaries. You want to stay with salaries that were there pre COVID-19. You don't want to do anything that's going to raise it because, again, at some point, this is going to be looked at and it's going to either be approved or not. If it's not approved, then the whole thing has to be paid back, like a loan.
But when are you going to get a chance to get a 1% interest rate loan?
That's exactly right. It's 1%.
If you're a restaurateur, what's your calculus and sense of saying, okay, I can either get this money and I cannot spend it on my employees now because I've got no work for them, but I'm going to need it to reopen and rehire them and get new inventory later and just say I'll pay the 1% because that's a pretty nice loan.
Absolutely. That's free money.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, to get a 1% loan.
The Independent Restaurant Coalition is asking for $128 billion earmarked specifically for the restaurant industry. Is this a pipe dream or can this happen?
Of course it can happen. And I think what it really means is that the industry, and again, I think the industry's done a nice job to this point, but they got to keep lobbying, they got to keep working it. Again, as you said before, when you're looking at the numbers of the unemployed that have spun off from the restaurant industry, from the hospitality industry, it's a big chunk of people. And they need to just keep pushing. They need to be pushing locally, they need to be pushing statewide, they need to be pushing nationally. Stay involved.
The squeaky wheel gets greased.
That's exactly right.
And so they do have a form on their website that you could send a letter to your congressman by signing up, basically put your name on this list saying, yes, I support that. So we encourage everybody to...
Members of the hospitality industry pay a lot of taxes.
They sure do.
They're a huge percent in Illinois and I'm sure across the country, and I think ultimately they will be heard.
And what about some of the other parts of the CARES Act? Are there any concerns, if you got the emergency relief money or there's the other tax, payroll tax incentives? It seemed like there might be some ways to overlap, like you can't use this funds for that, or if you got both of these, you'd have to make sure to take care of other things very clearly.
Yeah, well, the emergency loan, I think that's only up to $10,000.
Right.
So, I mean, it's truly, if you've really got an emergency, it's a small amount of money, but again, that would help. But you can apply for that. You can still, under the CARE Act, you can still be, working through on the PPP. What they really need to be doing is spend the time to go online, read through these things, make sure they understand them, and then apply for where they think that they fit in.
And one of the other ways that a lot of bars and restaurants set up GoFundMe accounts. And just to, a lot of places have loyal following that might not be financially hurting through this pandemic, and so they've raised a decent amount of money doing that. Is there a concern, anything that they need to be thinking about in terms of taxes if they get these donations and then they pass them to employees, whether the employees have to be concerned about taxes or the person who created the GoFundMe account?
I don't think so. I mean, it's if it's something that's given as a contribution and you give it to your employees, it's not wages, so there's no tax on that. I think when I look at it, and again because of just what we do, we look at it and it's like just be careful on a GoFundMe page if that GoFundMe page gets supported by a supplier. Or a distributor, obviously, there could be trade practice issues involved. Right. But if they're going out to the public, to their loyal followers and so forth, I'll always say this, and Mark will say the same thing, is always talk to a tax attorney before you start down those roads. Just talk to somebody. But I don't think there's an issue with that.
Another issue that's come up, and it's really been put under the microscope lately, is the fees that the delivery companies are charging restaurants, and saying that they're unsustainable. And when delivery was just a small piece of your business, you can make the decision whether to pay them or not. There's been some talk, and some states are putting forth legislation to cap those fees.
Well, the city of Evanston has acted and put a cap on fees, so that these delivery services can't charge, I forget what it is, but can't charge more than whatever it is, $5-7 for Uber deliveries, for example. So there are some movement in that regard. And you have I have some clients where attorney generals are asking for information because they want to see if there's price gouging.
It's not going anywhere. The delivery, the online ordering is even when we get back to our new normal, whatever that is. I think people got accustomed even more so to ordering at home, and the trend was already going that way anyway.
Well, I think you're right. I think that a lot of things are going to change permanently, not just for the restaurant industry, but for a lot of industries who now all of a sudden are used to having home workers and things of that nature. I don't know if it's going to be the same. It'll affect leasing.
Right.
Who wants to sign a longer term? They want to sign shorter term leases, and they want to get rid of space, and maybe some aspects of hospitality industries that are larger. They might have found a way that they worked out to control some of their expenses going forward.
Because Illinois is a very unique state. For licensing, you've got state licenses and then you've got local licenses. So each city under Illinois' Home Rule Authority can be a little bit different on how they license and their control and their regulations and so forth. So it's always been difficult trying to get a good read across the state as to where you can deliver, where you can do curbside delivery, and pretty much across the state, they've all lightened up on that, and they've allowed curbside delivery now. You can even stay a lot of places. You can stay in your car, and they'll put it right into the car, check an ID, put it in, and the delivery with alcohol and so forth. And I think there's going to be a really good chance that that's going to stay, because I think they're going to all see that it wasn't the boogeyman they thought it was going to be, with alcohol being delivered to a car and so forth. So I think that's the good part about this, is I think that business plan for the businesses that can do that, that's going to stay, I think. And that'll just kind of add on to that, being able to, if your occupancy is 100, and depending where it ends up after this is all done, but when you can do delivery food on top of that you don't have to worry about occupancy, that's just profit on the top.
And where do you do believe that the alcohol delivery or alcohol to go is here to stay?
I do. The question's going to be with this, I think, in Illinois, is whether we're going to get down to an area that it can be more than just the original package, a bottle of wine, a bottle of spirits, a 6-pack of beer, to where maybe they can get to the point, right, where they can start creating like to-go kits. Where you could put together, if you got for just a delivery, if it's me, if I wanted to get a hamburger, and because I'm from Wisconsin, I like old fashions, I want 1 or 2 old fashions, they can put the small bottle of spirits in, they can put the mix in, they can put it together and get it out, and then you can make your own cocktail when you're home.
But some of the ingredients of the kits, maybe pushing the limits on, packaging and that sort of a thing. But I haven't been aware of any enforcement actions against those sorts of things.
But the kits that they're advertised most are getting a full bottle. You might not need a full bottle of Benedictine or something for you need a half ounce or for one cocktail perhaps.
But I'm talking more about smaller containers of mixers that, technically speaking,
like the airplane bottles.
Which would run amok of what's required by City of Chicago's packaging laws, and I think the state of Illinois has laws about mixed drinks, about things being sold in their original packages and things like that.
What is the big concern? Is it? There's a lot of reasons why it's really very similar to beer and wine that comes in its original bottle, or getting a cocktail at the actual bar. So
Joe, it's the same thing I say to the regulators all the time. What's the problem, right? And as Jim pointed out, maybe some of these things they'll view as not such a problem when they see in practice, how it's working without the problems they might have anticipated.
And there's online petitions for that as well, because if you're a cocktail bar, you're really getting hammered because no one's going to your place, no one's going to the violet hour to buy a bottle of wine.
Right.
I'm sure some people might, but that's really not their bread and butter. So they've kind of cut them out of the pie. Right.
And when you look at the industry, you had prohibition set in, so you almost had a restart in 1933. This has always been kind of like the younger brother that nobody wants to show. Beer gets out there pretty easily, and you can buy beer a lot of times at a gas station and so forth. And spirits has just always been treated a little bit differently, and it's always kind of behind. I think that's part of what's going to happen here, as you're talking about, Joe, is that you're going to start to see that people are going to understand that if you can order a pizza with a six-pack of beer, why can't you order a steak with a martini kit? That you can put it together when you get to your house. Again, it would be an airplane bottle or a little bit bigger bottle, and have your mixes with it so that you can make it, and it's good for the industry. And I think the public policy concerns in the past, if you really look through them, they're just really not there.
The other option is doing what we did during Prohibition. I wasn't around back then, but when they would sell the wine, like just add water and you could make wine or something like this. But it's not a wine kit, but
right.
So switching gears a little bit, we did want to touch on some real estate issues, whether you are renting or own a bar or restaurant, and some of the concerns of being able to pay rent and whatnot. Any tips for restaurateurs?
I can talk about leases specifically, but a lot of the same concepts apply to loan documentation. You have to look at your lease. In Illinois, they let business landlords and tenants in the business environment cut with any deal they want. So you have to look at the actual lease. There is a concept called force majeure, which is often a clause set out in the lease. And I think it's French for superior force. And in there, you'll often find defenses for non-performance of your contract obligations under certain circumstances. So, it'll suspend or discontinue an obligation because some greater force that no one has anticipated has shown up and is sort of rendered it impossible for you to do your business. The obvious one is COVID. So these clauses often have so-called acts of God in them, reasons why you don't have to perform your obligations, like paying rent.
It's fairly standard to have some.
It's very standard, but the clauses themselves aren't standard. They're very narrowly construed, so courts won't sort of extrapolate wider. So you really have to focus on a case-by-case basis every lease. They might have a force majeure clause, but what it actually says changes pretty much from lease to lease. And it'll say stuff like acts of God, sort of like earthquakes and mudslides and tornadoes, and then sometimes they have a little more acts of war, terrorism, and then if you want to tie into the COVID-19 issue, you're looking for language that says like disease, national medical emergencies, things of that nature. So that you could say or governmental closures, which has grown out of the COVID-19 problem. So if you can find that specific language, you're in pretty good shape. You say, well, I have an excuse for non-performance. The governor says I can't open my business. So that's not foreseeable, and it's nothing I contributed to, and I have no control over it. You have to be careful, though, because a lot of these sorts of clauses actually have language that landlords put in saying, regardless of what it says, you always got to pay your rent. And a lot of these commercial leases define rent as basically any monetary obligation you have. Okay, I pay $4,000 a month, but I also have to pay some common area maintenance expenses. The lease calls it rent. I have to pay a percentage of real estate taxes on the building. The lease calls it rent and things of that nature. So you have to look at your lease and see what kind of defenses you may have.
And if it doesn't say anything specific to disease or governmental shutdown, because those aren't things that we've actually had a shutdown for in the last 100 years.
Right. Well, it could say stuff like things that are unforeseeable and out of your control. Then you get to the idea of whether it was foreseeable. If I signed my lease a year ago, no one was talking about COVID-19. It's a pretty wide So you have to, again, it's sort of like fact specific, and you have to look at what your lease says, if it says anything about it. And there may be in various portions of the lease. It might not be obvious, so you should probably talk with a lawyer and sort of look in various portions of the lease. For example, notice, a lot of leases say you have to give me notice of a default and an opportunity to cure.
Yeah.
So it's like I didn't pay my rent, and they send a notice saying you didn't pay your rent, you got 5 business days to cure it, otherwise you're in default. Then you look for a definition of business days, and business days might be defined as Monday through Friday, or it may be defined, it might not be defined at all. Shockingly, a lot of leases don't define what a business day is. But if your business is shut,
Is it a business day?
I don't have to pay you till the next business day or 5 business days. Well, there's no more business days.
Right.
So, but it gives you something. So you have to actually read the lease. And there's similar concepts in loan documents. So, and if there's nothing in the lease, they're very hard to get relief, to find defense in the common law. But there are a couple. There's something called frustration of purpose. I'm trying to give what would be a good example of that. That would, let's say you sign a lease and then you find out the zoning doesn't permit you to run a restaurant. You could make it. Usually leases will address that. The landlord will say, I'm not making any reps or warranties about whether you can conduct your business there. But a lot of leases don't.
Yeah.
So you could make this sort of an argument saying it's the whole purpose of the lease. Also, sometimes people rent out locations because they want to watch a parade. I'm renting out your restaurant, or for a time period because of the parade, or because there's a park here. And then the St. Patrick's Day parade, for example, gets canceled. So the purpose of the lease, the landlord knew that was your purpose. You put it in the lease. I'm leasing this because I want a place to view and have a few drinks and all that. And there's something called impossibility. And I'll tag it into something maybe we were talking about early. Like, this is where maybe the government goes up and required Ford to build respirators. It's sort of like they could go to a distiller and say, now you're making hand sanitizer.
Right.
So we want all your manufacturing to be hand sanitizer. And if you're a distiller and you have a contract for a private label and you're supposed to be making something for someone else and you can't do it, well, you'd say, well, it's impossible, I can't do it. Those aren't, they're very difficult to prove. There's not a lot of cases out there on them, and a lot of them go the wrong way from the tenant's perspective, but they are available. We should talk to an attorney to look at all this and discuss it with you. You should also probably talk to your insurance broker.
That was my next question. Is those terms also are insurance policies sometimes as well, right?
Right. A lot of commercial leases require tenants to get business interruption insurance. They're required to get a lot of insurance, liability insurance. Someone falls and breaks their neck, the landlord doesn't want to get sued. Casualty insurance for all the restaurant equipment. So there's insurance. So if it burns down, you don't go to the landlord saying, "Hey, it's your fault. So I don't have." If you have money to pay for it, workers' comp insurance, because landlords do get sued if their tenants don't have workers' comp, and they should have. One of the insurances a lot of them require is business interruption insurance. And I have clients that don't even know they have it. You have to give a certificate often at the beginning of a lease term before you even get possession, showing the landlord you've got all this insurance. Of course, there's dram shop insurance if you're selling alcohol. And the landlord wants to be named as an insured. So they get a certificate at the beginning, they work with their insurance people, their brokers, and then they just pay the premiums. And I've had a couple clients during this pandemic tell me that I say, go talk to your insurer. They find out they have business interruption insurance. They didn't even know. It makes one big problem go away.
Some of the cases, though, that I've heard is that they might have had that insurance, but the insurers are trying to fight against it.
I've had one client let me know that he got a 7-page rejection letter of why it doesn't apply. I didn't read it. It's not what I do. You need an insurance expert to deal with that, especially a litigator. So I suggested they go talk with someone who's an expert in this. I've read that there are a lot of people who think they have business interruption insurance, that it's supposed to cover non-payment of rent and common area maintenance expenses and all those sorts of things, that a lot of these companies are rejecting them for one reason or another, but that's sort of a different issue. It's when you get the insurance, making sure it's covered. I don't know, maybe some of these companies, if they pay them all off, they go out of business, so maybe it's, I'll deny it, but that's not, it's not my sort of area of law. Sometimes I know one of my clients, in talking with the landlord, that they had business interruption insurance that they buy for themselves. And they can't make the claim until they don't get the rent paid for some period of time. But that's good knowledge to have as a tenant, because they can't. It's pretty hard for them to look right or go into court and say, I have coverage. I got coverage for the non-payment of rent, but I'm suing the rent. Well, what's your loss? Kind of a sort of a thing. So it's important to do that, and you also should just talk with your landlord.
Do you do that before you talk to your lawyer?
No, you should talk to your lawyer first, I think, because you got to be careful with a lot of things. It's always good to talk to your lawyer, and you have to be strategic. If you start sending notices, by the way, if there's a force majeure and you're going to claim that, my performance is excused because of COVID-19, because the governor has closed my business, this is covered. You have to send notices very often, and not always, but you might say, well, obviously they know the governor closed the state. You got to be pretty tense. But my legal advice would be to someone, like, if there's provisions in the contract to talk about notice, and there almost always are, certified mail, return or reset, send it, even though they know. They should send the notice out. But if you send that notice, it's hard for you as a tenant to argue that there isn't a force majeure that doesn't excuse the landlord from performing its duties. And you don't want to and they might not agree with you. They might say, well, the language isn't that clear. It's not a force majeure. You're trying to preemptively end your lease early, and you give them a lawsuit to run into court. So you got to be careful. There's a lot of things that by sending it out, the notice saying it's a force majeure, the lease lets me out, where you may be triggering things that you don't want to happen. Landlord, I don't have to do my build out anymore. I don't have to do this because the lease, I'm going to end the lease on you. And you might not want the lease to end. What you want is to talk with the landlord, with your lawyer's advice, to see what you can work out. Tell them what your plan is, talk about, rent and that sorts of thing, either forgiveness or some way to, delay payment. You should realize that many tenants don't, is when they're talking with their landlord, ultimately the landlord often doesn't have the right to make a deal with the tenant. That's because they have lenders. And a lot of the loan documents say lenders are always concerned where their money's coming from. So they don't want, their tenant. I represent lenders, so it's like they don't want their borrowers cutting deals with tenants, reducing their rent without their knowledge. Because how are they going to get paid? So a lot of times they have lease forms that you have to use, and a lot of times as a tenant you sign documents from a lender, whether you realize it or not. They're called estoppel certificates and non-disturbance agreements and things like that. So when a lender makes a loan, they don't take the borrower landlord's word that the tenants exist, that they're paying their rent, what kind of security deposit they're holding, whether the landlord paid their rent 2 years in advance and the landlord's already spent it. So they send documents to tenants. In order to get the loan, the landlord has to get the tenant to sign it. And a lot of times what you're signing, it says stuff like, this is how much I pay a month, I haven't paid my rent more than a month in advance, the landlord's not in default. And oh, by the way, if the landlord is in default, you have to notify us, the lender, or if you want to amend the lease, we have to approve it. So you've already agreed to it, and you might not even realize it. So there's a sort of lot of pottery. You might have cut a great deal with the landlord, but then you find out that it's not worth the paper it's written on because you agreed that you wouldn't do it without the landlord. So there's a lot of sort of moving parts in here. It's good to talk to a lawyer about it.
I know a lot of large businesses can claim bankruptcy and continue to operate. What do bars and restaurants have in their back pocket if they can't pay some of their bills, but they think that they can still make it if they could just not get a reprieve from their current obligations?
Well, they can file bankruptcy as well. There's a couple different bankruptcy routes you can take. Typically, if it's a business and it's a corporation, an LLC, partnership, they'd probably be looking like a Chapter 11, which would allow them, it's a reorganization. So it slows everybody down. As soon as you file that, the court will normally enter an order that's a stay order, keeps everybody away. If they're on the delinquency list with the Illinois Liquor Control Commission, with distributors, it also puts all of that on stay as well. So they can truly operate, try to get their finances back in place, and then come out of that with a game plan in paying debt to bring themselves back current. Now, in 2019, I think there was a amendment to the bankruptcy code with a subchapter V under Chapter 11, which is really focused on small businesses. And I think with that one, Mark, I think that you don't have a creditor trustee that's involved. I think you're dealing really with a trustee that's more on the small business side. And again, there are bankruptcy experts out there that they should talk to somebody like that, but there are ways, that's an option. And then while you're in bankruptcy, while you're in that reorganization, there is a stay order that will keep you busy or keep you operating until you come out of it. So it is available for small guys as well.
And that includes their liquor license. They can still buy.
Yeah, everything stays in
I
place.
mean, beer's cash and everything else is 30 days you have to pay by. So if you blow those, then you're not going to get alcohol. But,
Have you seen your clients, their landlords, being willing to work with them in general?
a lot of them are sort of like trying to hold it off. Some have offered programs. I've had clients where they, ask for, financials, a plan for going forward, and they're willing to defer rent payments. Again, some are waiting to see about, I think, their own insurance claims that they have for, the insurance they would have for getting the rent that their tenants don't pay. The fact of the matter is there are so many tenants. There's sort of like some strength in the numbers of people. They can't start throwing everyone out the door. And again, a lot of this decision might not even be up to them. Most projects, or a lot, especially the big ones, have financing on them, so their lenders are also calling the shots too. If they start filing to force all these people out, where they're going to get their money and who are you going to get to replace them? This is a situation where when they say, okay, you can open up now, go full bore, the economy is still the economy. And it could take quite a while for it to recover, as it did in our last recession. We had a lot of clients, I had a lot of clients that didn't open up, and even when they did, it was a hard road to get back to where they were. They're in the same situation now, maybe even worse, because we really don't know where we're going with this stuff. So, so again, it's good to talk to your landlords. I think the better, why would they throw you out? Who are they going to get to replace you? And if you were a good tenant, except for this, well, a lot of people were cut short. So, it doesn't. I represent a lot of landlords too, so it doesn't make sense just to throw them out. Who are you going to replace them with? I could imagine some scenarios where they would take that risk and want to throw them out because they have a 20-year lease and they're paying 20% of market rate. Right. Well, give me a reason to throw you out, So they might be less willing to try to work something out with you. And who knows? Let's see what kind of legislation or what sort of relief that they might get in terms of loans and leases. There are certainly a lot of people screaming for it, and not just people in the hospitality business. There are whole groups that are trying to band together not to pay rent all at once, which would be really devastating to the banking industry.
Yeah, there's always winners and losers. So it's not just like, sweet, I don't have to pay my rent. Somebody, whether you feel bad for that other entity or not, but somebody's not getting paid then, and that has effects down the line.
Right. Well, a lot of these leases are personally guaranteed. Sure. So it's not just losing your business, it's losing everything.
Yeah. Thinking about the employee more than the employer, the owner at this point, there's been additional unemployment insurance, the extra $600 a week. How is that affecting tip credit employees who might not have much of a salary to go off of, and if they were underclaiming their tips, does that negatively impact? I'm sure there might be one or two of people watching that might have cut $1 or $2 off of their tip claiming at the end of the night before.
I think the minimum wage for tip employees in Illinois right now is, I think, $5.50 an hour. And I think that's going up on July 1st to $6 an hour. But it's really, I mean, the unemployment benefits are all based off of what you're earning and what you've paid in.
Right.
So, for the employees that are tip-based, and if they've been underreported in the past, that is going to hold their unemployment down. But, again, for them is they should get into that. They should go down to the unemployment office. They should make an application for benefits. And as long as they're out there and as long as they're currently looking for work, the benefits will be there. And my guess would be, as you're talking about too, Mark, I think the real key now is to watch legislation as it rolls through, because I do believe there's going to be legislation to help. There's just going to have to be. There's too many.
Obviously, it's a really fluid situation. I think that both sides, owners and employees and landlords and banks don't know where the rules are going to end up, and what's available.
And let's say they do come back. They got we're opening back up, even if we're going to have you painting the walls or helping garden, or something. What if they get there and they don't feel comfortable, that the employer isn't providing a safe work environment in terms of the new reality? They haven't adapted to face masks, things like that. Is there any power? What can they do?
Well, I think that, again, is going to be based off of what sort of legislation is going to be in place, what's going to force the industry to get up to. And that I guess, is one of the things that in looking at it, it's the one thing that Illinois, I really think, from a government side, really needs to start building out and at least start letting industry see what's going to be there. I think face masks and gloves are probably going to be the new norm for waitresses and waiters and bartenders and so forth. But you've got all these other things that play into it. It took how many years to get sneeze guards at salad bars? What the next one's going to look like, I'm not sure.
This might be the end of buffets and salad bars.
It very well could be. It very well could be the end of those things. And what sort of rules get put in place for employee safety? All of that's going to keep coming out with this as we work through it, and it's going to be one that the industry is going to really have to be. And again, you look at the industry from top to bottom, and I truly believe the hospitality industry, the alcohol industry, is got some of the best and brightest in the world involved. You look at labels, you look at marketing campaigns, you look at names of restaurants, you look at concepts. It's a very resilient group, and it's a very smart group. And so as long as government starts giving them a little bit of a heads up as to what they can expect, I think the industry can take that and go with it. I mean, we talked about it before, but the whole delivery and curbside, before that it was really such a small piece of business, and some of the businesses have been able to really adapt, and it's their on-premise business now, which is an off-premise business. And I don't think that's going to go away. I mean, that'll be still rolling around, and you'll be dealing with that. And
it's definitely a creative group. I mean, you've seen it also with converting more from like individual meals to family meals to meal kits to groceries. And I think a lot of people are dipping their toe in the waters, and it will be interesting to see what happens next. But I agree that this group will figure out solutions because they're going to need to.
Exactly right. And we talked about it a little bit before, is there seems to be some push inside the city to start getting even, the beer gardens, the sidewalk cafes opened up, because, it's a little bit more protected. You're outside. Right. So you can start maybe filling that. So it's going to come down to how they're going to start filling it back in, right, and what sort of rules get put in place.
And also to your earlier point, I have read that future federal legislation, when it comes to funding and aid, they're considering or going to require laws that protect employers from lawsuits against customers and employees.
Claim they got sick at work.
I got sick. I got COVID. Somehow you owe me a job or compensation or something like that. So because they have to realize that's a real problem, even if you want to come back.
I mean, so there's lawsuits, and there's also just when people actually do get sick. Obviously, nobody wants them in the restaurants,
right?
whether they got sick at the restaurant or outside of the restaurant, where do we stand with the laws in terms of paid sick leave and who pays for that? Is it they're going to make the bars and restaurants up their insurance on all those things?
I don't know. Well, there is, unemployment insurance that there's, employers do pay, or they're supposed to be paid.
But sick leave? Like, that's not been something that's been readily available for this industry.
Right.
It's always been an issue, even, when
Sure.
I was managing, like, people were sick, but they would show up, and then it's like, well, we don't want you here, but, like, I need to pay rent tomorrow, so.
It almost seems to me it'd be counterproductive in the sense that you're trying to help. It's going to cost so much money to try to get these businesses back on their feet, and you're saddling them with more expenses right out of the box. Maybe at some point, maybe a quid pro quo if you're in business, or at some point in the future as part, but up front it would seem pretty.
Right, and there's going to have to be that personal responsibility. I mean, there will have to be something built into it that people just will have to. If you're sick, you just can't go into work.
Right.
You're going to have to stay home.
Right. But it's not a new problem. There are plenty of people who go to work sick because they feel they have no other choice.
Yep.
Now there'll just be more of them,
So-
and maybe with more severe consequences.
Once they do start trying to get open, what fees do they have to make sure they're current on before they can start operating again if they've let things lapse?
Licensing fees.
And insurance.
Insurance.
Their dram shop insurance, that's got to be in place, and your licenses have to be current. The state has put off renewing licenses until July 31st. So anybody's license that comes up for renewal right now, you'll be able to continue till the 31st. As we talked before about, local licenses, they really have to check and keep watching with their local towns and counties if they're unincorporated to see where they're at. Chicago at this point has not elected to push licensing fees down the road. So if your license comes up, whatever it says on your license certificate, if it's coming up for renewal currently or in the next month or two, they really should plan on renewing those licenses. They got to keep their licenses in place. They got to keep their dram shop insurance in place.
With the dram shop insurance, all policy, you have the dram shop insurance insuring the city. And all those policies have to have notice provisions put in there that they can't cancel those dram shops insurance policy without providing 30 days prior written notice to the city of Chicago. So if you don't pay it, the city knows it. And they're going to they'll send their inspectors out, and they'll say, give us proof, and close you down. So that's one that you really got to make sure that you pay your dram shop insurance, because, again, a lot of clients don't remember or don't realize that the policies themselves require them to notify while there's still insurance in place that it's going to end in 30 days. So the city typically calls you in and says, give us the evidence of insurance. If you don't have it, they close you down and they fine you.
So if you're
Whatever.
closed down anyways and saying, well, I don't have the money and we don't plan on opening up until June, is it risky to even have that gap? Is there penalties beyond that, maybe some late fees?
I don't think with the insurance company, I think that's something that they should probably talk with their insurance agents, and they can kind of put that on hold. They have to have it in place before they open back up. And, and Mark is right. At this point, they're going to get the local, at least Chicago, will get the notice that it hasn't been renewed. But I just don't believe that while you're closed through this, if you're truly closed, that there's going to be a penalty and probably an explanation to the city. And maybe it makes sense at that point to notify the city that you're closed. Your license is in place, but you're going to be closed for the next month or two, and that you're suspending your dram shop insurance, and that you'll notify them as soon as you're getting ready to open back up.
Right. It's if the city's getting a notice that the insurance is being terminated and the city's going to lose its coverage because they get sued too, that means that the licensee doesn't have insurance, and that's an awfully big risk, and it's probably a violation of your lease as well.
Even if you're just serving food, perhaps. If you're like, well,
This is dram shop, but any sort of insurance, absolutely. But you're taking a risk, obviously. The city might not care if you have liability insurance. Maybe they should. But or workers' comp, but someone else does. So another state agency will come after you for that. Illinois Department of Employment and Security would have something to say about that.
But a lot of people are saying, I pay rent or buy groceries for the family.
You could decide not to sell alcohol, but as Jim's pointed out, it's a very high margin item.
Well, speaking of other income streams for potentially bars and restaurants, there's gambling that a lot of the suburbs allow, and that's bankrolling them. That's a lot of times like they really have a bar and restaurant just to kind of support the gaming machines.
Right.
What are your projections of that coming to Chicago?
I've heard a lot of people think it's going to happen just because money and taxes. And coming to Chicago, I have clients that are making decisions on whether they stay in business or not, in part on whether that's happening or not. Because the numbers, you don't need a lot of machines to make an awful lot of money.
Right.
So some of these places that are hanging on, they're kind of hanging on because they're smaller places or the individual places are sort of like
Right. But I'm not hearing anything that it's being introduced to the city council and anybody's really looking at it there yet. But this could be an impetus that could kickstart that.
Again,
get it into
exactly because of the economic realities of what's going on. And I don't know,
Right.
I don't know if Lori Lightfoot's been supportive or not, but I mean, the city's always scraping looking for income, but boy, here's another one.
What other questions or concerns that are your clients coming to you with? And this, you may even broaden it to maybe distributors, suppliers, because there's a lot of craft, we talked about CH and stuff like that, so maybe they have different concerns other than your traditional bars and restaurants.
Well, one of the things I think, and everybody's seen it seems, at all of the tiers is there's a lot of product. Everybody's got a lot of inventory. Distributors have a lot of inventory. Retailers that are really out of business, except for the off-premise, the on-premise guys, they've got a lot of inventory. But, they should all be talking to the tier above them and see if some of their product, especially if it's case sealed, if they can return some of it. Beer is probably the toughest just because it expires.
Right.
But they should be looking at that. They should be really, looking at it from all of the angles to cut their costs as much as they can. And again, I truly believe it's like any other time in the life of a business. Sometimes, it's going well and you're feeding well and you're just really rolling. Other times you got to be down in that mentality that says, I've got to get from here to this place in the future, and I've got to make sure that I keep it going.
Yeah.
So they got to get their costs down.
And that's another thing I've learned actually too is relationships. I didn't have a relationship with our bank. It's just like they were some place that I would send my money to and withdraw the money to. But when I had to apply for our PPP loan, I didn't have anyone to call. No one was calling me back.
Well, there was a lot out there. So people who had better relationships with their banks got their money.
Yeah.
Although I know a lot of the banks were reluctant because they weren't getting enough feedback from the federal government about the guarantees and, to make sure that they were all set up. But the larger borrowers tended to get the money, and that's another reason.
And for some things like that, you look at that and there still is a place in society for a community bank. And sometimes you're much better off in a community bank where you're not facing with all of the really big players, because as the money came down, especially this second tranche, there was, I think, of that $340 billion, I think $60 billion just went to community banks and credit unions.
To your point, I have a client that deals with a local Chicago bank that has a few places, and they got financing like right away, like in record time.
Yeah.
So it's because of the relationship they've had with this bank, over the community bank over the years. So you're correct. The other thing is on returning product. It's up to the distributors essentially, but the ILCC, at least with respect to deliveries before a certain date, have gone on record as saying we're not going to object.
Right, correct.
Because they can object to it. There's very narrow rules about when you can. They don't like returns. They're worried about consignment sales and all those other things that they worry about.
Yep.
But they're saying, just for the record, we're okay with it.
For now, is that like a different?
For now, all this stuff is sort of like for now. But ultimately, the distributors can say,
Right. And
we're not taking it back.
And what they did with that is, and again, it's always good to keep watching the Illinois Liquor Control Commission, their website, because they're putting guidance up.
Yeah.
But what they did with that is they took that 30-day period from, I think, March 17th, when the order went in effect, and they
Yeah.
went 30 days before that.
Right.
So purchases that were in that,
Right.
that those would be eligible,
Right.
that they can request. And there's also issues with that. I mean, that's what I said, a case sealed. It's one thing for a distributor bringing back a sealed case.
Right.
It's another thing bringing a bottle back. And the liability that could come back with a bottle, being adulterated and so forth. So there's lots of other issues that play into this.
As you said, a lot of retailers have large
Right.
inventories
Yep.
in the beer, especially.
Obviously, you're really stuck with which products you can. If you need Maker's Mark, you've got one place to go there. But you can
Right.
decide which vodkas you want to carry, which gins you want
Sure.
to carry, which beers you want to have in your tap, based on how your distributors helped you out in this situation.
Absolutely is. It's life is built off of relationships, and in this one, because where we're at, you've got, as we've talked about, there's relationships with your banks, there's relationships with your professional providers, accountants, attorneys, there's relationships with distributors, with marketers, and there's a relationship with government. I mean, go in and talk to your alderman. Go in and talk to the mayor of your town. The mayor, by the way, is also the local liquor control commissioner. Talk to these people. Let them know what's going on. And the more people go in and talk, the more that they really see how huge this issue is in the industry, the more chances you have of getting some sort of relief.
Right. And talking about relationships, I remember when we met maybe 5 years ago or 6 years ago here in this office. There's a story that I was reminded of last night about now that The Last Dance is on. And, it was the whole Isaiah Thomas and the Michael Jordan thing. And didn't you represent Isaiah in a champagne of his?
Yes. Yep, he's got a champagne called Chirlan. Champagne, so it's from France. It's a fabulous champagne. And again, one of those small companies that they're really struggling right now because champagne, the issue with champagne is no matter how you want to cut it, it still is a product that's built for celebration. And there really isn't a lot to celebrate right now. So you've got all of these different, again, as we've talked before, you go up the ladder, you've got issues at all three tiers with people that are still, the issue is it's consumption. And everybody's trying to work through those issues and so forth and try to keep them going. As I've talked with Isaiah on it and other clients, and Mark's talked with his clients, it really is get yourself in a position, you got to survive right now.
Right.
But as you're surviving, you got to start looking, you got to always be forward thinking, and you got to be starting to think about when it starts to open up, how can I utilize that and be out front and really be moving with it so that if it starts to move, because you got to move right away. I mean, you just can't wait.
And you can't just expect it to go back the way it was.
Yeah.
It's not going to be.
Absolutely.
So talk to people, listen to podcasts that have ideas.
Exactly.
And we've been helping our clients think outside of the box too. How do we put together different packages? All right, let's get a liquor kit together for your to-goes and things like that. There's going to be a new normal, and nobody knows what it is, but a lot of people are trying stuff, so we've got to stay out there.
I mean, the industry advocacy groups are very good.
Yep, they
They're
really
constantly
They really are.
coming up with things and working at it.
And then for the record, though, Isaiah, you said, was a super nice guy, so I know he was put a shine negative light on episode 5 there, but
He is a guy, and I've traveled with him a bit in meeting with distributors and so forth, that wherever you go with him, traveling to an airport with Isaiah is if your gate is a 10-minute walk, with Isaiah it's going to be an hour and a half, because he will stop and talk to everybody, get his picture taken with everybody. He is, when you talk about a celebrity like that, I've never seen somebody that's so people focused as he is. Wonderful man.
And he's a Chicago guy before Michael Jordan was a Chicago guy. He's a
Yeah.
huge guy.
That's right.
Good. We'll give a little shout out there. Maybe he'll sponsor the podcast and we'll sell a bunch of champagne. And
Excellent,
celebrate.
excellent.
So, what made you, gentlemen, just to kind of get a little backstory about, you said you worked together, you clerked together. Was this happenstance that you got into the alcoholic beverage part of law? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go. Did you know from what point that this is the direction you wanted to take?
Probably. Well, I started working for a firm that did all of the work at the Board of Trade. They did hearings with churning counts and things like that. And I spent my first summer as a law student working for them. We went through one trial at the end of the year. It was a churning trial, and it was nothing but books and records. And it was every trade, all of the documents had to go in, and by the end of that week, it was the most boring thing I'd ever sat through. And I said, something's got to change. And they ended up forming a new firm, and they brought in 2 attorneys that did work in the alcoholic beverage industry. And I think the first week they were in there, I worked on a under the cap program for Stroh's beer. And this is like an 82, and if you open up a Stroh's, that you could win something underneath the cap. And because alcohol, as Mark said before, it's so interesting, because it's controlled by the 21st Amendment, every state is different. And they've got different laws. So as you work across the country, we both work across the country, is you get into all of these things that are driven by constitutional provisions, but are really different. And I got in there, I started working for them and loved it. And then at one point there was too much work, and they said, hey, do you know anybody else that would be interested? And it's like, I got the perfect guy. And Mark came over and we both clerked there. And again, it's something that when you work in this industry, it's a really people industry. It's a wonderful industry. And you get into it, and you end up spending a lifetime.
I kind of circled back to it. Jim was generous enough to recommend me for the job there. It was always a fun place to work. There were a bunch of characters there.
Yes, it were.
And there's a bunch, and the hospitality business has a lot of interesting people in it. But when I was still in law school, when we were in law school, like, it was 82, there was a recession on.
Right.
It was a bad recession, actually. And we're interviewing for jobs, and the only job I got it like 6 months before I think I got out of law school, was in the tax department of Arthur Andersen. So I have an accounting degree from the University of Illinois. So when I finally got out of law school, this firm didn't hire me, and I needed a job. So I became like a tax lawyer, and talk about wanting to blow your brains out and pushing paper around. It was kind of fun, but I did stuff that wouldn't transfer to sort of individual practice, which I knew I always kind of wanted to be. I didn't want to be at a giant law firm. Arthur Andersen, as you might recall, is a huge public accounting firm. Thank you, Enron, but I was long gone by then. And I would do stuff like, when can you start depreciating nuclear fuel? Does it have to be loaded in the reactor, or does it have to be just delivered on site? And those are the sorts of things I'm working on. I'm like, I'm not going to leave here. No one's going to knock on my door and say, hey, I got a question for you. I got this nuclear fuel. When can I start depreciating it? So I got out of there as soon as I could, and I looked for jobs. It was hard. You remember, it was very difficult. 81, 82, it was a pretty bad recession. I ended up working for some law firms. I liked doing real estate. I worked at one place that did banking work for a short period of time, then a place that did a lot of real estate work and banking work, and then small firms. And then I went out on my own fairly early on, I think like 86. And then I started getting some work, because I knew how to do it. You figured out that there really, especially back then, wasn't a lot of people who did liquor law.
Right.
As their practice. And I started getting more and more, and then, sometimes I get conflict stuff. There are things they didn't want to do because it was too small, and I was, working very hard on my new firm. And then I ended up taking, Jim was back there working. He became a partner. Then I rented office space in their beautiful office at 10 East Huron,
Right.
Which is now at the Ukrainian consulate.
Yep.
The beautiful building. So and by that time, the whole firm was just all liquor, all hospitality law. And so I was there. And so I picked up more and more of that sort of work. And I enjoy sort of real estate stuff, commercial real estate. I don't like residential real estate. It's not worth the money. But, and I like the liquor stuff. And it's like I knew how to do it, and it was interesting, and it's kind of hard to learn unless it's, a lot of that stuff isn't, you can't look at a case book, and there are some. It's nuanced. You're dealing with individuals, you're dealing with aldermen, you're dealing with legislators, you're dealing with community groups, you're dealing with some very interesting characters. I would say that a lot of times the laws don't keep up with the innovation in the industry. Like, we're going to have, they have bottle service in New York and LA. Let's have it here. Oh my God, you can't have,
Right.
You can't do that. That's like, Armageddon's here. You're having bottle service, and so it's interesting, and it's constantly evolving, and so I started doing more and more and more of it as I went on, just because there's the work's out there.
And I don't know how beautiful that office was on Huron Street, but we're not in a bar right now for those watching. We are in Jim's office here, so this is...
Used to be my office, too.
Okay. This is a pretty sweet space.
Yeah, well, that's my whole point. It's, for practicing law, it's not bad.
And if people want to get hold of either of you...
Mark at chicagoliquorlaw.com. That should be easy.
And jwebster at lawwp.com.
And the next thing is, I had asked Jim if he'd be so willing to give something for this, because a lot of these people that are watching, they might be struggling right now and don't have the money to do that. And a lot of times throughout our interview here, you guys said, talk to your lawyer. They might not have a lawyer. So Jim has agreed to give an hour and a half of consulting time to a lucky winner. And so we're going to have a contest on social media where you'll get an opportunity to win an hour and a half of consulting services. So thank you for that.
You very much.
Wow, thanks.
Okay, the camera.
I'll get an hour and 40 minutes of consulting time. With it, because of the circumstances now, I'm doing a lot of work for free.
Right.
Because, I do, grocery stores and things like that, which are doing well. The vast majority is hospitality businesses, and they just don't have the money. So
Exactly.
Thank you both. And thank you for taking your time today. I know you are busy. We pulled Jim out of the North Woods to come back down to the city here. So thank you so much for your wisdom, your experience, and sharing your time.
Sure. Thanks. It was fun.
Did you hear that? Jim and Mark have each agreed to donate an hour and a half of their time to 2 lucky winners. To enter, check out our Instagram at @get_tapped. For other resources, from financial support to mental health support to places to donate or shop to help the industry, head over to gettappedin.io/what'sontap. If you have a resource you want to be listed or have new show ideas, send an email to gettapped@gettappedin.io, or send us a DM on Instagram or Twitter at @get_tapped. Don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new episodes, and give us a thumbs up if you're already enjoying the show. This episode of What's on Tap was hosted by Joe Sheehan, with special guests Jim Webster of Webster Law Partners and Mark Wilcox of the Wilcox Law Firm. The show was produced by Joe Sheehan and edited by Rebecca Turley. Our AV technician was Nadine Lomaton, with voiceover and marketing by Caitlin Kavanaugh. Subscribe and stay tuned to find out what's on tap next.